We are working with the State Historic Preservation Office to identify and document sites that the Olmsted firm designed in Connecticut, and also to tell the story of the relationship between Frederick Law Olmsted and the later generations of the family and Connecticut, and how growing up in Connecticut fed into Olmsted's professional work as a landscape architect, and how the work that the firm did here relates to their work elsewhere, where it sort of fits into the bigger picture of landscape architecture. He is from here. He was born and raised in Hartford, educated in various places around the state. His family traveled a lot, looking at scenery, so that sort of fed into the way he looked at the world. And so he was seeing the scenery of Connecticut when he was growing up, so that's part of the memory that fed into the way that he designed landscapes. Olmsted's career is interesting because he took him a while to find his profession. He tried a number of things. He was a farmer, he was a journalist, he was an author. He spent time traveling through the South in the 1850s, writing about Southern society and especially slavery, and especially the economics of slavery, and sending articles to the New York Times, which were later published as books as well. And he was very convinced that slavery did not work as a social system, and was working for abolition. He just got started. His landscape design for Central Park was done in 1857. And he'd done a couple of other small jobs before the Civil War actually broke out. But certainly his idea of social reform connected with abolition also fed into his landscape design, and his idea that parks were places for all segments of society to come together and to get to interact with each other and know each other and work with each other, and that would strengthen society and democracy in the United States. Connecticut, of course, is sort of gentle hills and valleys. It was much more open, land cleared for farmland in the middle of the 19th century. So you would have had longer views and a sense of fields and dotted with trees, perhaps, or with trees around the edges. And you see that in his designs. A lot of them are sort of open meadows dotted with trees and surrounded by trees at the edges to give them a sense of shelter and definition. Cities are growing rapidly because of the industrialization. Connecticut's a leader in the Industrial Revolution in the United States. And Olmsted believes very much that contact with nature, it can be refreshing, reviving, give people a sense of relaxation and refreshment, and that it works on you kind of subconsciously, that you just go out and you experience the nature and it works on your inner being, so that he wants to make this available to everybody. And that's important for him. He's known as, first of all, for designing public parks. And that's the idea of providing nature to city dwellers, and also a place that's available and open to everybody in society. That parks for Olmsted are places where all ranks of society, all kinds of people come together and meet, and they get to know each other, and it sort of helps to strengthen society, to strengthen American democracy, because people see themselves as belonging together. The first landscape design that Frederick Law Olmsted does, and the one that he's best known for, is Central Park in New York, which he designs with Calvert Vaux and spends many years creating. He works with Vaux on a few other projects, such as Seaside Park in Bridgeport. He works on other parks. Beardsley Park in Bridgeport's another design that Olmsted worked on. Walnut Hill Park in New Britain. He works on designs for the Institute of Living. Well, in those days it was the Connecticut Asylum for the Insane in Hartford. So again, there's that idea of landscape as a healing presence for the patients at the Institute for Living. He works on the design for the state capitol grounds in Hartford. And he consults with Hartford on building a system of parks. So he's looking beyond an individual property to a broader sense of how the city is laid out and how it provides open spaces all around the city so they're accessible. And that leads really to the development of town and city planning as well, as it's further expanded by Olmsted's sons, the Olmsted brothers, in their work. At Walnut Hill, Olmsted was given a piece of ground that had a very high hill on it with a reservoir and then some open space. And he designed a couple of sort of formal garden areas that were not built at the time. But what you mostly see from Olmsted's design, again, is this open meadow with a few trees dotted through it. It stretches out, has some ball fields in it now, but they're sort of fitted into it unobtrusively. So it's this very peaceful kind of landscape. The pastoral, he referred to very often, the idea of the field, the meadow, the trees, thicker plantings around the edge to sort of shelter it from the city. For Olmsted, the idea was to provide access to nature, but he also realized that with a lot of people coming, it was going to put wear and tear on the landscape, so he had to design it to stand up to that. He had to provide drainage so that wet places could be drained out and people wouldn't get their feet wet. He had to provide paths for people to walk on so the grass wouldn't get trampled. He had to think about, how people would use the park, how they would move through it, not only in an aesthetic sense, but just in a practical sense as well. One thing that he did that you'll see in Beardsley Park is the idea of separating different kinds of traffic, so that where you've got a footpath crossing a carriage path, he'll put a bridge so that the people walking on foot don't get run over by the carriages. He does a lot of that in Central Park, and a later generation of designers put one of those overpasses in Beardsley Park as well. Yes, we've identified about 130 places in Connecticut where the Olmsted firm worked. Most of those are Olmsted brothers, but Frederick Law Olmsted was involved with a number of them. And Olmsted's legacy really is bigger than just the places that he himself worked on. There's the ongoing work of the Olmsted firm. There's the ongoing work of other landscape architects who may have started in the firm and learned the profession there and then gone out on their own. There's just the notion of having parks, which he helped to popularize through his works. And he also was very interested in natural conservation and not in preserving places of great natural beauty, such as, well, Yosemite and Niagara were places that he worked or advocated for. But the whole idea of natural conservation was something that we value and that he strengthened in the 19th century. The trends in park use change over time. Olmsted was thinking mostly in terms of what we call passive recreation, walking, driving, looking at scenery, and the idea that scenery would work on you sort of subconsciously. Later, people put more emphasis on active recreation, on more formal kinds of design, sometimes places for ball fields and playgrounds. And those can be worked into the parks, but you need to do it carefully to fit into the natural landscape and not just obliterate it. These landscapes are places of beauty, they're places of history, and they're part of Connecticut's character and heritage, and especially because of the role that Connecticut played in shaping Frederick Law Olmsted and the Olmsted firm. You can read about Olmsted sites currently on the American Society of Landscape Architects Olmsted Legacy Trail, which is online. Preservation Connecticut, my organization, and the State Preservation Office are working together to document more Olmsted sites around the state. And when that project is done, probably next summer, we'll be working on making it available to the public. So there'll be more information for people to look at and places to go.